All right, I want to welcome all of you to the first EDA meeting. It's going to be exciting. There's a lot of stuff that town is moving forward on. I think that this group is going to help leverage a lot of economic development in the town. And today, obviously, is our first overall meeting. We got a pretty decent agenda. It's more of just an intro of what we're going to do. It's going to talk about EDA 101. We have folks from the Virginia Economic Development Department in the state. And also, I would like to kind of go around the table, have everyone introduce everyone. There's a brief bio of who you are as well. And then I want to introduce the staff that will be supporting EDA as we go forward. So let's just start going around the table and have everyone introduce themselves.
So my name is Frank Stankiewicz. I own Green and Ground Electrical Services here out of Front Royal. I've been in Front Royal for about 6 years now, and have a local office here in town. And I've also been in business networking for the last 3 years.
My name is David Gedney. I own the restaurant Element in Front Royal. We started very small with a small little apartment-sized restaurant in 2003. So I've been here pushing 18 years now. And grown to where we are now. So, yeah.
Very good.
Mark Tapsack, co-owner of Mountain View Music, 217 East Main Street. Have been here for about 3 years in this area, although my wife's had family here a little bit longer than that. Scientist by training. I've had a role of teaching chemistry before. So the bio's not quite correct in saying that I teach currently, but work in the medical device field and on healthcare devices in particular.
Very good.
I'm Jim Crowell, owner of QCon Incorporated. We're a federal government contractor based right here on Peyton Street, and we've got locations in, actually we're adding our 8th state right now, just adding Illinois. But it's IT, cybersecurity, and site prep, construction work. I mean, that's our 2 areas.
Isaac Rushing. I own Honey and Hops Brew Works with 2 of my brothers here on Main Street. Moved here from Alaska about 3 years ago. Started working with the town. Did that for a couple of years until the business is kind of taken off. So,
Very good. Alex, you want to introduce yourself? All right. Lauren?
I am Lauren Bishke. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning and the Zoning Administrator for the town.
Lizzie Lewis, I'm the new Special Events and Public Arts Coordinator for the town.
George Sana, Assistant Town Attorney.
BJ Wilson, Director of Finance for the town.
Tina Presley, I'm Clerk of Council and Executive Administrative Assistant to the Town Manager.
I'm Brandy Cameron, I'm Legal Assistant.
Very good. And I'm Stephen Hicks. I'm the Town Manager and the Economic Development Manager, and I'll discuss more about that change as well as the Chief Building Official. So we have a lot. Roger, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm anonymous today.
Roger. And then we have Mike McCool, who will be videoing this meeting and stuff. So let me see if Grant's available so we can go ahead and start the Zoom team.
I don't think she's going to be available till 11:30.
Okay. Well, still, everything's ready.
Everybody at the table introduce themselves?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Bass. Nice to meet you all.
So we're a little bit ahead of time, and Grant's trying to connect with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership folks. What we'll be doing is, I felt it would be good for us to go ahead and kind of have just a little rundown of what EDA 101 is, and what all of your roles will be, and what opportunities we can do to make Front Royal better when it comes to development. And so, while we're thinking about it, we're gonna go ahead and just skip to number 5 while we're waiting on it, about freedom retreat. And so, once we go through this part, I would like us to schedule a retreat if possible, maybe a day, all-day retreat. Because I think once we get caught up on everyone's roles, it's important that we kind of identify what we want to do as a group. What will our target be, what you all feel we should try to target, and there's a lot of target. It could be everything from helping redevelopment, it could be from purchasing property so we can try to stimulate and target certain type of economic development. It can be helping out when it comes to infrastructure project with the town, specifically that's going to help businesses. It can also be a part of us to be able to decide if we want to buy buildings and stuff and lease those buildings to also help either startup companies or other type of means. So there's a lot of areas that this board will need to focus on what and how we want to prioritize and what we're willing to get involved in, as well as understanding the risk and liability of doing some stuff. So I just think that that would be beneficial, and so I'm just throwing that out of there. There's also going to be a lot of other stuff where we'll have to develop a strategic plan, economic development plan. So this is literally like a startup business from the beginning, and you all, through staff support and guidance, will be the ones who will be making that decision when we create both the strategic plan and the economic development plan. And that's going to complement our rewrite of our comp plan. And so they go hand in hand, because in the comp plan there will be an element with economic development. And then that will be a driving force of trying to identify certain areas within the town where we feel like that would be an opportunity to either develop or redevelop. So there's going to be a lot ahead of us. It's going to take some time. It's going to take us to roll up our sleeves, but it's something that I look forward to. What I want to share with you, the mayor and council, they are 100% behind this, probably 110%. And so what I mean by that is they're going to be definitely looking forward to the outcomes of some of those reports. They're going to want to be able to kind of get a sense of the direction you all would like to do. This is driven from bottom up. I'm sure there will be a joint council EDA meeting with council too, just to try to just touch base and try to get some feedback from them too, because I think it's worthy that you all get a sense of what their expectations are or how they feel that this group should function. So when we go over the bylaws, this is really going to be the Bible of how we're going to operate and how everyone's going to function in the roles and responsibilities as well. So let me know if there's any thought about the retreat and the time frame you all feel would be beneficial when you would like to have the retreat. This is an open discussion.
Is there already an idea of some data and information that's going to kind of come to this group, so we learn a little bit more about, you know, what might have been some staff activities already, right, in gathering up either reports or...
And that would be part of the retreat. It'd
Oh,
be
okay.
part of sharing all the data, sharing where we are in the comp plan. BJ, the finance director, may share some financial situation where we are and how it looks. That's the whole retreat
Well,
part.
Steve, where I was going with that is, obviously, put the retreat after we kind of have that critical
Oh,
information, right?
all right.
So I'm assuming we're not talking next week, but there's other things that have to happen, right, before we
Well,
kind of pick this retreat.
yeah, I was hoping to have a wedding date, though. You know,
Mhm,
set a
yeah.
date that we can think that's our goal to get to, and then start in between. I mean, we'll have more of these workshops
Yeah.
or work sessions to discuss and get data and get information and have Lauren, and if someone could come, you know, a special meeting to, well, a scheduled meeting to come up here, as well as other staff to kind of give you the lay of the land and data, but that's a good question. So,
Are we looking to do within the next month of doing the retreat?
no, I think that's too early at this point.
Okay.
You know, I was thinking sometime in March, you know,
Okay.
because that way we can get a lot of information and then that information discuss at the retreat. So, and I don't want this to also, I mean, feel free to kind of share what you all think. I mean, this is, you all are the board. We're here to support you. You know, we serve in essence at the will of the board. And if you all feel there's a direction we should go, or, you know, as mentioned, we should have the data collection first, or what you all would like to see on the agenda, that's up to you all, if that's helpful. So I'm gonna pause here, so each of you have an opportunity to give your thoughts on what you would like in the retreat. You know, are we in agreement in March? Could we narrow down the second, third, or fourth week of March, or try to figure out a time frame? You know, possible dates, and then we coordinate those dates.
On the retreat, is it gonna be a week there or weekend? That process is
It,
for an all day or?
among you all, you can discuss that, and then we look to see what availability we have.
Isaac and I both have sort of, not determined by tourism, but certainly that as that starts to enter in early spring, so late March, April, and Rick too, we're gonna see an increase, and so availability will kind of crunch, so, you know, summer and winter months are very easy for us. I'm not, you know, you're not a year into it yet, but I'm just kind of forecasting for it. That would be, you know, so as that month goes on, it just gets a little bit more restrictive to me, but not impossible.
I think early March is fine.
Good with that?
Same here.
Do we have a location in mind?
What would you all like? What atmosphere? What, I mean, we could do the retreat remotely, we can do the retreat here. We can,
I'm in favor for in person.
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely,
like that.
definitely we're
Yeah.
gonna do in person.
I just generally like to be away from where I normally work, so since I've never been in this room before, I mean, to me, it's kind of sky's the limit, right? So anywhere kind of convenient in Front Royal or here,
All right,
fine by me.
all right, so we'll look at different venues. Is that good among the group?
Yeah.
All
And
right,
and as far as dates, earlier in the week, I mean, is that kind of better for people in the businesses that we're kind of in? If we're talking a day, right, I mean, you know, certain things say Friday or Saturday are a little bit.
Well, yeah, again, just like the year of the week is the same way. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are typically slower.
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday are more difficult, but I can make things, at this moment, I have staff and can make things happen, so.
so I'm just throwing out some possible dates. What about, March 8th is a possible day, it's a Tuesday, I don't know how, I mean, typically, I feel Mondays, when you all get back to work, it's crazy, if it's anything like,
March 8th sounds good to me.
all right. What time would you all like?
It's gonna be an all-day thing, 8 AM seems like a reasonable start time.
8 AM? 8th at 8, all right.
8 to 8, 3, 8 at 8 AM.
All right, let me see if, if we can start earlier on the presentation.
You want me to go last?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
My apologies, everybody, for being late. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rick Novak. And this morning we had a monitor for our concession fail, and so I was trying to fix that at the, I'm talking about at the bowling center. And, got like a full house senior league there, so that starts in like, 30 minutes. So, so anyway, my apologies.
Rick, you know pretty much everyone, don't you know BJ? Can we briefly just go real quick for Rick? Just to-
Director of Finance.
George Sonnet, Assistant Town Attorney.
You know me, Rick.
We met yesterday.
You know, Lauren
Lauren
And
Bishke.
Lauren, yeah.
and Brandy, she's a,
Legal assistant, Brandy Cameron.
Hi, Brandon.
and we all know Tina runs the town, so,
The real town manager.
yeah.
Grant will come in when she's ready. He's just
Okay.
waiting for her to join.
All right, sounds good. Technology is the best. So, well, what we could do is we can go ahead and start the draft bylaws. I don't know if you all had the opportunity to read it.
Rick, do you have an agenda?
Here you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know, again, being late.
So it's, I know it's a lot to read. It has a lot of, legal jargon, but how many have had the opportunity to read this? And if not, that's okay. The point of it is just to put it in front of you, so you can have it. We can discuss more on the bylaws at our next meeting. But part of that is, other bylaws, is we're gonna establish how often we wanna meet, on a regular, basis. So, most of it's straightforward. What I do wanna do is draw your attention to, page 4, under the Board of Directors, ADA. This is a draft form, and it's really up to the board to determine if, how we go about identifying more of the assistant secretary and treasurer. But what we do know is the board needs to identify the chairman and the vice chairman. And, we can not have to make that decision today. I think all of you need to be thinking among yourselves who you want, and then we'll go there. The assistant secretary and the treasurer, we have staff to support in that area for those roles, so we won't be looking at that. So be thinking about who you want as a chairman and or a chairperson, I want to make sure, and a chair. So,
Can we work together for a little while before we make that decision?
that's what I'm saying, it's
Yeah,
whenever
yeah.
you all decide you want to do it.
Okay.
And
I mean, don't you guys think before you voted,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't, most of us, we really don't know each other that much, so.
So, I want to draw your attention to page 5. I don't know if this time, the third Thursday of each month, is a good time for us to meet during this time. I know everyone's busy. And so, it could be, you can participate, and if you need to leave early, I understand that. Any critical voting matter, we would definitely arrange that to make sure at least a quorum is here, or all of you are here. So would a third Thursday around this time be good, David?
Mondays would be best for me, but I can do, like I said, I can just keep working around all of this.
All right.
I'm just trying to, if anyone else has those kind of, schedule issues, that's fine.
And we're willing to accommodate. I know staff Mondays are,
Tough.
slammed. as
Sure.
usual.
Yeah, Mondays are
It's
tough.
gonna be tough on me as well.
Yeah.
Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are better.
Yeah, middle of the week is usually better. I usually have my deliverables at the end of the week. Very beginning of the week is trying to wrap up everything from the previous week and get ahead on things that are coming. So yeah, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are typically better. Tuesdays being the best, because those are usually the lull in the week as far as work goes. from consulting.
Tuesdays are big meeting days for me.
Are they? All right. Wednesday?
Thursday works really well for me.
Yeah. Thursday's fine too.
Among you all to. All right, well, how about we pencil in right now, and we'll, if you change your mind, just drop a note, and then at our next meeting, we will formally, hopefully adopt the bylaws as well as when we plan to meet on a regular basis. I want to draw your attention on page 7, number 8. We were, well, at least I was, it gave me some thought about how Warren County is now structuring their EDA, of where the executive director would be more of the economic director, reporting to the town manager or designee as a staff standpoint. And the reason for it is, I think it's going to provide even better resources for the EDA to be able to provide the support they want. Because right now, you know, the role of the EDA would have been, you hire EDA, you also hire staff, and we feel that among you all that we have the bench strength to help you all out to be successful. And so while we're taking baby steps, right now we're looking at that model of what other localities are doing to help save the town and citizens, well, the citizens' taxpayer dollars. And so typically, if you're looking at what other localities are doing, they will have the staff support for EDA instead of the EDA responsible for hiring staff. How do you all feel about that? All right, Rick?
Okay.
All right. So that's where page 8 on number 4, where it says the EDA employees will be supervised by the chairman. So that's where we would remove that role until you all feel we may need to look at revisiting the bylaws.
That's what I was just gonna say. I mean, if it becomes a problem or if there's just bandwidth issues, right, with particular staff, that's always something that the council could come back and say, no, we think we need, you know, a position, right?
Yeah.
Would justify it.
And then on page 8, number 1, to go with the flow of what Rick has shared, there may be some redundancy in creating an executive committee where the board would have to establish one on number 1, where it says, upon the adoption of the board of directors of the executive committee, such committee shall be composed of but limited to the chairman and vice chairman, secretary and treasurer, which would be staff. If the exec committee, if one is created. So the question would be, do you all feel at this point we need to create an executive committee? It may be redundant until you have worked with the group to establish. We can always come back and remove that. Is that fair?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think so. I think we should all be involved
Yeah.
right now while we're, you know.
Yeah, we want to, that's one of my goals, is everyone's involved, we're very transparent, we try to get off as much information out. And then,
I was gonna comment back onto, I mean, one of the functions sometimes of an executive committee is just even simply to set up the agenda for the next upcoming meetings.
right,
But early on, having everybody kind of have input on that, I think makes
That's
sense.
I think we want to be able to form an executive committee when it makes sense.
Yeah.
At some point, right?
Agreed.
I agree. And then, that's mainly the changes that I thought of, but I wanted to bring it to you all, because ultimately you will have to adopt the bylaws. And then if you see anything else, we'll revisit it at our next meeting as well. And then from there, once everyone's in agreement, we will vote on it, on the bylaws.
So at our next meeting, we should be prepared to vote on the bylaws, right?
I
I
would
mean,
I'd be
or
prepared.
come with prepared comments
Correct.
and be prepared to vote if we think we can.
Correct, we can make the changes right on the spot, and then if everyone's in agreement with them, we'll do a roll call and accept our bylaws.
Great.
Sounds good? All right. Grant, I think we're ready to start our EDA 101. Are we all there? All right, let's see if, Sandy, do you want to go ahead and start off? Can you hear?
You're still muted, Sandy.
I'm on mute, so
All right.
I knew it was going to be on mute, but yes, I'd be happy to go ahead and get
All right,
started.
welcome. I really appreciate you doing this. I really do.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to do it. My name is Sandy Mcnair. I'm General Counsel to the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. And I've been here for, 14, 15 years. In my prior life, I was a bond lawyer, public finance lawyer, and I spent my days working with authorities like yours, working through business issues, incentives, bond issues, a whole range of things. So I have a good bit of experience in dealing with the Industrial Development Revenue Bond Act, which is what you folks are acting under, and have a breadth of experience in working in those issues around the Commonwealth. And as I said, I joined VEP about, I guess it's been more than 14 years ago now. I'm going to start my mission, as I understand it, is to provide you just some basics on how authorities operate and what your powers and purposes are, and what you can do and can't do, and so on. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The presentation really right now is sort of in two pieces. The first part is all powers, purposes, what can you do, what can't you do, and then the second half is sort of the mom part of the speech. Sorry about that. Where mom wants you to know about the Freedom of Information Act, the Conflicts of Interest Act, and the other things that go with being a political subdivision. So I know you have other training on that, so we're going to buzz through that pretty quickly, but just wanted to let you know that we're going to sort of have two pieces here. I'll go ahead and get started, and I'm first going to put in a plug for, here goes my notification. Put in a plug for VEDP and let you know where we fit in sort of the ecosystem for economic development in the Commonwealth. VEDP is very much like the Economic Development Authority for the Commonwealth. We're a separate political subdivision, we're an authority, we're managed by a private board, much like you folks. People who've been appointed by the governor and the General Assembly and a couple of ex officios for good measure. Got about 160-ish employees, most of them in Richmond, others of them spread around the Commonwealth, and others of them spread around the world. So we have offices in Munich, Japan, Seoul. Used to have one in China until recently, but now we're just down to Germany, Japan, and Seoul, and South Korea. Our CEO, we're currently CEO-less, but our CEO, when he or she gets appointed, will be appointed by our board. And Stephen Murray, who just left after 5 years stint as our CEO, would have been the first one to tell you that had this been a more traditional economic development structure where the state had a Department of Economic Development and he were a gubernatorial appointee, is not a position he would be interested in. It's really a selling point for us and for the Commonwealth. The virtue of having authority is that you're sort of one step back from the political winds that blow. You can take a long-term strategic view, you can do some long-term planning, and you don't need to worry about what politicians want to worry about necessarily. You can make business decisions, not political ones. So that's why VEDP is set up the way it was, and it's been working pretty well for us for over 20 years. And just to let you know, we have a strategic plan. We're in the third year of a 5-year strategic plan. Excuse me. You see I know it's probably hard to read, but you see over on the left-hand side there are 5 goals in the strategic plan. The second of them is sort of, the first among equals. All of these goals are important to us, but the second of them really stands out for us. We want to make sure that every region in Virginia wins. It's not good enough that the Crescent succeed, Northern Virginia, Richmond, Hampton Roads. We need all parts of Virginia to succeed. It doesn't necessarily mean every county and city and town is going to have the same growth rate, but we do expect and want, and we'll are working towards making sure that every region has the assets and the things that it needs to succeed. Okay, so now on to the rest of the presentation. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about some legal stuff. We're going to talk about your purposes, powers, and functions. We're going to talk about common and uncommon activities that authorities work on across the Commonwealth. And then, as I said, the mom part of the speech, we're going to talk about FOIA, procurement, conflicts of interest, and various sort of miscellaneous stuff. Okay, so let's get a move on here. Okay, Virginia is a Dillon's rule state, meaning that political subdivisions, such as yourselves, only have the powers expressly granted to you by the General Assembly. So to grossly oversimplify, you got to be able to open up the Code of Virginia and point at what it is you want to do. So it's all about being able to point. Ordinarily, and generally through the Virginia Code, you would need to be able to point with something with some degree of certainty and clarity. You can't just sort of point into it. But you're invited by the General Assembly under your Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act to think of your powers expansively. So yes, you have to point, but you don't have to point too precisely. So long as you're doing things within your mission, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, you should be good to go. So you have a special that many political subdivisions don't have, which is to think of your act and your powers expansively. There are 3 provisions in the Virginia Constitution that will come into play, and again, we'll talk about these later on. The credit clause of the Constitution prohibits the lending of public credit for private purposes. One always, though, needs to look at the animating purpose, the reason for making that investment. The Commonwealth invests every day in companies. It has cash lying around and it needs to invest that cash. It does that every day. But it's not doing that to help those companies or to do anything to benefit those companies. It's just making an investment because that's what it needs to do. So its animating purpose is the public one of making sure that public monies are being handled properly and not for making investments in company. The second one that will come into play is the Public Purpose Clause, which not surprisingly requires that public funds be used for public purposes. Economic development is indeed a recognized public purpose. And the third one that comes into play for economic development is the Uniformity of Taxation Clause, which provides that all similarly situated property and taxpayers need to be taxed similarly. So in some states, you might see, read in the paper that, oh, if you come do business in New York, you just don't have to pay taxes for 10 years or whatever. We can't do that in Virginia because of the Uniformity Taxation Clause. Every business and every person and every piece of property needs to be taxed similarly. And we'll talk later on how to work this into incentives if you want to provide incentives. Okay, powers and duties. So what's in a name? You folks, I believe, are Economic Development Authority. There are other people just like you that are called Industrial Development Authorities. The powers are exactly the same. It's just a matter of a different name. They have exactly the same powers under exactly the same act. So if you're talking to someone that says, oh, I'm a member of the IDA of Greene County, they have the same powers and doing the same thing that you folks are doing. There are, just so you know, lots of other types of authorities under the code. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should have said first on, you are welcome just to shout out questions if you want to. I can't go through slides and keep track of the chat box at the same time, so please don't do that. Just feel free to, yell out whatever your question is, and we'll go ahead and take those as they come along. There are other types of authorities under the Virginia Code. REFAs are really much like EDAs, of the Regional Industrial Facilities Authorities, and that's where 2 or more localities join together to do a common thing for economic development. Generally, but not necessarily, an industrial park. So the industrial park might be located in Community A, but it'll be funded by Community A and Community B, and when a business locates there, those 2 have agreed that they will share the tax revenues from the company that's in that park. So again, pointing under Dylan's rule, REFA can point to the specific authorization under the code to engage in revenue sharing with another locality for tax revenues generated through that industrial park or other asset owned by the REFA. There are housing authorities that, not surprisingly, do housing stuff, public service authorities that do water and sewer and solid waste mostly, community development authorities that do public infrastructure in discrete areas, usually shopping centers and housing developments, that sort of thing. Pay for infrastructure in those areas up front. So what's an EDA? Your enabling legislation is the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act. You are a political subdivision of the Commonwealth, much as VEDP is. You are a separate legal entity, much as VEDP is. You are not the town that created you. The town that created you is not you. You have a separate political subdivision. You are a different thing. Authorities are usually created by one locality, but they can indeed be created by two or more, as you know. Authorities, even if they're of separate localities, can indeed work together in a cooperative way on projects. Usually 7 directors appointed by the locality's governing body. Excuse me, you have very broad powers under the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act, and you can do really most anything so long as you do it within your animating purpose, which is to promote industry and develop trade by boosting manufacturing, industrial, governmental, etc. facilities to locate in or remain in the Commonwealth. Now, if you're providing a grant or something to somebody, you're helping with development of land, that's certainly going to benefit a private company, but that's okay, because that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it for public purpose. Did someone have a question? Okay. You folks are uniquely qualified to assist with economic development, and again, if you want to offer incentives, to administer those incentives, because you, remember Dylan rule pointing, you have powers that are specifically granted to you that are not granted to the town that created you. So you have specific powers under the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act to make grants to private entities, to sell properties without holding a public hearing, to lease and sell properties at above or below the fair market value, or to give them away if you want to, and not just to the highest bidder, to issue bonds for the benefit of private entities, to make loans to those private entities, and if you're so inclined, to forgive the repayment of those loans, to exercise all your powers beyond the borders of the locality that created you. You have statewide power. To think of your powers expansively, and as I said, to deal with properties statewide. Those are all things that can be enormously helpful in administration of an economic development program. Those are all things that are not granted to the town that created you. That's why authorities are so important. That's why they can be so powerful. And that's why they can be used for good. So sources of IDA funding. No surprise to anybody in the room there, I'm thinking, that most authorities operate on a shoestring. Most of them operate on a contribution of money from the locality that created them, and there is specific authorization in the code, pointing for the locality to give money and property to authorities. Amherst County did something interesting. This was maybe now 3 or so years ago. When Sweetbriar was thinking of closing, I think they had a holy crap moment that their main economic development engine was about to go away, and they hadn't really done much else to boost their economic development in the community. So they instituted a 1 cent increase in their real estate tax and have dedicated the revenues from that 1 cent for economic development purposes. And they've done interesting things like done a survey of all the properties in the main commercial corridors to see what's it being used for now, what might it be used for, what's it good for, what parcels are still there, what greenfield sites are there, and have done a good job of sort of characterizing A, where they are, and B, where they might want to go. So interesting. Many authorities have revenue from properties and their industrial parks. So I'm sorry, somebody?
That's a cough. It was a call.
Okay, well, no coughing. I mean, come on. It's just, it's just so distracting. I mean, come
Clear
on.
my throat.
Go outside. Gotta do that. We'll talk later about issuing bonds, and most authorities would charge a fee for issuing bonds, so that's a source of revenue. We'll talk later on about these different zones, enterprise zone, technology zone, yada, 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 and the kind of list goes on. And you are authorized under the code, again, the town is so inclined, to capture a portion of the real property or machinery and tools taxes in those zones and dedicate that revenue for economic development purposes. You have no power to tax, thank goodness, I think stars there. And there are some modest federal and state grants that are available. On the state side, we at BDP administer a couple of grant programs just for localities. One of them is a brownfields grant program. A lot of times, and especially in older downtowns like you folks have, there are properties that have been sitting idle perhaps for a while. And part of the reason why those properties hasn't moved or been taken care of is that no one quite knows what's in those properties, and they're a little scary. So we have grant money that's available to help localities do phase 1, phase 2 environmental audits, whatever needs to be done, just so you can take some of the uncertainties away and know what's there and know what you're dealing with. And then we can offer, again, very modest grants above that to allow you to do something. So if you just need to get the bad asbestos-laden caulking out of the windows, we can provide some grants for taking care of that as well. We also have a Virginia Business Ready Sites program, which will help with the development of industrial sites. You folks probably don't have a site in the town large enough, but if you did, we have a grant program that can help you get that property ready for development. It's really, we've known this all along, of course, but it's really come to play this year and in 2021, last year, how lacking Virginia is in large mega sites and things that are suitable for large facilities. We were actively involved in 7 different projects in 2021 that would have had capital investments well in excess of $2 to $3 to $4 billion each, several thousand jobs per project each. So last year alone, we lost out, and I haven't added it up, 23 billion in capital investment and maybe 10,000 jobs, high manufacturing, technology jobs that we would have loved to have simply because we don't have anywhere to put those people. We have been given in the governor's proposed budget a significant amount of money for our Business Ready Sites program that can help close that gap, but it is a huge failing on behalf of the Commonwealth and one that we hope to fix this year. I don't know if this is a trend, and I haven't seen it for economic development, but I have seen it in other contexts where localities ask for an additional ability to do a sales tax. Usually the local sales tax piece is 1%. And localities have asked for another 1% opportunity for sales generated in the locality. In Williamsburg, they did it for, not surprisingly, tourism development purposes. And in several other localities are doing it for school renovation projects. And in fact, there's a bill that was considered by the Senate, I believe, yesterday, that would extend that authority statewide for schools, for localities that wanted to put a 1% sales tax in place for school purposes. So I don't know if there's this is a trend and you think you want to add a sales tax increment to your local sales tax and dedicate that for economic development or something else, there might be an opportunity to do that. So common activities, these are the ones we're going to focus on this morning. Economic development support, both internal and external, product development, administering grants and incentives, and issuing bonds for private entities and localities. So economic development support for internal. Economic development is absolutely positively a team sport, and you guys are very important members of the team. And internally, you can be the eyes and ears of the business community, and in your community, I hope you are, and report back to the locality concerns that you're hearing, if there are themes that you're hearing. if at your Rotary meeting, every Tuesday, somebody else complains about how long it takes to get, a permit for electric work or, whatever it is. Make sure that the town knows about those things so that they can be addressed and taken care of. So be the eyes and ears of the business community and report back to local staff and your elected officials on what might be helpful. Then the flip side is also external, being the voice of economic development in your community. A lot of what we do from time to time is foreign to other citizens. Why are you investing upfront in properties when you don't have anyone who's going to be on those properties? Why are you so concerned in making sure that the local high school is offering trade things? So being the voice of economic development and explaining to people what's going on, why it's going on, how it's going on, can be enormously helpful. Getting the voice out and speaking about them. And you may be asked from time to time to speak to prospects coming through your locality. Nothing tells a company what it's like to do business in a community than talking to people who are already doing that. So it's very important, and hopefully you'll be able to speak up and talk to those prospects when they come into town. Product development. Authorities aren't responsible for all the product development, but they're responsible for knowing about the product development and where there are gaps, where things need to be improved. Product development is what you're selling, and it's really everything. Do you have properties available for a company that are properly zoned and fully infrastructured and ready to rock and roll? Do you have a workforce that has skills that are appropriate, not only for the businesses that are there today, but for the ones you hope to be there tomorrow? Is there good access for vendors and suppliers? You sort of see the list there. It's everything. It's also other things going on in the community. Do you have a park system that's attractive? Are there libraries that are appropriate? It's really everything that makes a community an attractive place to live, work, and play, because all of those things are important for economic development. The administration of grants, not saying you should be giving grants, but if you want to, and many localities do, we're really at the intersection of the Dillon's removal of the credit clause and the uniformity of taxation clause that we referred to earlier. So you have the power to, the express power to make grants to companies for economic development purposes. And we talked earlier about other states just saying, oh, just don't worry about that, just do a tax abatement. Can do in Virginia. But you can get to pretty much the same place, and we'll talk about that in a second. Oftentimes, grants payable by localities are tied to a revenue stream. So you would agree to that if a company came and invested X million and created 25 jobs at $85,000 a year, that you're going to pay them back some percentage, pick your favorite number, 75% of the machinery and tools taxes that they paid in the prior year. That's often how localities will structure their incentive programs based on some percentage of the revenues that they have collected. So here's how we do that. Number one, the taxes assessed by the locality to the company, like every other taxpayer. The company pays the tax like any other taxpayer. 3, the governing body, in your case, town council, says, we agreed with company X that if they invested money in hired workers at good wages, that we're going to pay them back 75% of their machinery and tools tax. So let's go ahead and do that. Localities have express powers under the code to provide money to authorities. They pay it to you. You have express powers under the act to provide money to a company. You pay it to the company. So it's a bit of a roundabout way, but you can get to the same place as other states that offer tax abatements or reductions by using this roundabout way. But you folks are an important part of that roundabout way because you are doing things that the locality that created you doesn't have the express power to do. Return on investment, again, I'm not saying you should get into the incentives game, but if you do, you should know what your return on investment is. From my point of view, from Commonwealth's point of view, it's mostly the individual income taxes paid by all those nice new employees. And we also get sales taxes on capital investment, but not machinery and tools. From your point of view, it's going to be real property taxes, personal property taxes, machinery and tools, and perhaps other, tap-in fees and things for utilities and other things that you have going on at the local level. It's not that you always need to have a positive or a robust ROI. You just need to know what your ROI is and be comfortable with it. So for example, we have a program called the Virginia Investment Performance Grant. Its intention is to make it easier for existing Virginia manufacturers to modernize their plants. So we provided one of these, just as an example, a couple years ago for West Rock for a new boiler for their paper mill out in Covington, an enormously important economic development engine in that area of the Commonwealth. The old boiler was like 50 years old. They needed to upgrade that. No new jobs. They're just swapping out a boiler. So no new jobs, but a significant capital investment. I think it was like $35 million for the boiler. Guess it's a big one. Yes. So and we don't collect sales taxes, machinery and tools. We're not going to do that. So there's really zero tax revenue or additional revenue coming to the Commonwealth from that. But we know that making sure that project, that installation succeeds, is efficient, can compete, are very important things for being sure that we protect the jobs that are there and make sure that plant can continue on for years to come. So it's not always about the money, but you need to know what your ROI is and be comfortable if you don't have an ROI to cover whatever incentive you're talking about, that's a decision you've made and that you're comfortable with. Performance agreements. If you get into the incentive games and want to provide grants or other incentives, you should have a performance agreement of some sort with the company. Make sure you're upfront with the company about what the terms are going to be. I know I've had several conversations with companies over the course of my 14 years here where a locality surprised a company. We're going to give you a grant of $20,000. And the company gets a performance agreement for that, and there's like 1 million terms and conditions in there that the locality hadn't discussed with the company. It's okay to have 1 million things, but you just need to be upfront about that and make sure that the company knows that if you're going to offer an incentive, what the provisions are that are going to be applicable to them so they can access that money. Let's see, grants for specific programs. Lots of localities have these, lots of towns have these to their authorities. So these are small, usually, grants tied to specific things that are desired in the community. Lots of facade improvement programs around the Commonwealth where provide, again, modest grants, $5,000 to $10,000 maybe, for companies to help them spruce up the outside of their facilities. A little bit on the rising tide raises all boats kind of thing. So, hopefully shame the guy next door into making it look a little spiffier as well. Some of them are for signage when if you're going to upgrade your signage ordinance and you want to provide grants perhaps to companies that are grandfathered to assist them in getting up to the new signage standards if you want to. Lots of grants out there for COVID recovery. Hopefully those will wind down shortly. Many localities have been providing, especially in a COVID, working online world, small grants for marketing and e-commerce upgrades. So lots of companies were unprepared to do business online and didn't have systems set up to accept payments online for their goods and services. So some authorities provided funds for helping companies upgrade their websites to be able to do more e-commerce. If you're going to get into these, my sort of credo here is keep it simple, stupid, make it easy to apply, make it easy to comply, and make it easy to be successful. You want companies to do these things. You want them to be successful at them. Don't make it a 87-page application process and a 92-page performance agreement. Keep it simple. Keep what you need. Tell us out what you do. Bond financing. Authorities have the ability to issue bonds for private entities. How these work is that the company, the private company, is really responsible for putting together the financing. You folks are involved because bonds issued by you for most purposes are exempt from taxation. So the investor, whether that's an investment bank or a bank or whoever that is not going to have to pay taxes on the money it earns on those bonds, and therefore will be willing, theoretically, to provide a lower interest rate on those obligations. You have the ability to issue these bonds for manufacturing facilities, for what the IRS calls exempt facilities, which are airport stocks and wharves, solid waste disposal facility, sewage facilities, if they're privately owned, and for charitable facilities. So lots of authorities around the Commonwealth are involved in issuing bonds for their local 501c3s, and whether that's the local private school or Goodwill or the YMCA or whatever it is. So you have the ability to issue these tax-exempt bonds for those entities. This is where you may well be called into service for doing things on a statewide basis. So if a local hospital group wants to upgrade its facilities in your town, and also, while they're at it, 5 other facilities around the Commonwealth, they'd rather do one financing than 5 or 6, so they will come to one locality and issue bonds financing facilities statewide through that one bond issue. So this is likely where your statewide powers are going to come into play. You have no payment responsibility for these bonds. You are lending your name, you are lending your access to tax exemption. That's all you're doing. If the borrower, the private entity, fails to pay, sorry to hear that, but not your problem. The problem of the investment bank or the investor. And again, most authorities charge a fee for issuing these bonds, so it can be a source of revenue for you. Localities often do their financings through their authorities. So not so much that you're going to do this at a town level, but many county authorities are asked to do courthouses and especially schools in advance of a Virginia Public School Authority financing that might be coming down the road. So you can indeed finance public assets as well. We talked a little bit about these private activity bonds for manufacturing facilities. Because the federal constraints that have been in place for years but have not been updated in years, decades, literally decades, these are not terribly popular these days, and also because interest rates generally are so low. So the benefit of the tax exemption, although it certainly exists, the spread between the taxable and tax exempt rates oftentimes is not enough for a manufacturer to get involved with these and deal with the other restrictions you see there. Still popular for charitable facilities, but not so much for manufacturing. And we talked about doing these for 501c3s, still popular, and again, a reason why you might be asked to exercise your statewide power. Okay, less common activities. Well, let me go back to that because you might be asked about this as well from time to time. Well, you actually may well be. There's an extra super duper kind of tax exempt bond referred to as a bank qualified bond. Any one locality, including a town, can issue bank qualified bonds in a year up to $20 million. So you may be asked by a community that has a 501c3 facility that it wants to finance on a bank qualified basis, but that has itself used up its $20 million and doing something else. You might be asked to step in and do a financing for a standalone private school 4 counties over because you still have bank qualification available. Again, you have no payment responsibility. They're in charge of everything. You're just lending your name. You can earn a fee. So up to you whether or not you want to sort of play this game, but lots of authorities do that and earn a nice fee from a facility in another locality by issuing bank qualified bonds for 501c3s not anywhere near their locality. Okay, less common stuff. Owning and operating business incubators. And you might think that was more of an urban thing, but that's really not. There are many actually successful business incubators in more rural localities. Some authorities own their local airports. Some of them develop local infrastructure like Tesla charging stations. The one in Charles City County earned enough fees from the bond issues that it done for its local landfill that it owns and operates the fire station in the industrial park. I know you folks talked about this earlier on the agenda. Some authorities actually run their locality's economic development function. So in Henrico County, for example, they don't have a county Department of Economic Development. Everything is run through the local authority. And kind of for the reasons why it makes sense for BEDP to be a separate authority at the state level, some of those same benefits apply for doing things to the authority as well. Pros and cons. You can assist with special zones, and we'll talk about them in a minute. And you can, some authorities actually own and finance for companies, businesses, or not business themselves, but the land, the buildings for businesses, and then lease those facilities to a company. And many authorities, less common now than it was maybe 10 years ago, but operate loan programs for usually small business loans. If you're going to do small loans, that's fine. It can be very helpful for your local businesses. Sometimes they're industry specific, and so they're tied to a need that you have. Child care facilities, sort of a popular one. It's usually the first money in a deal and the last money out, so it's speculative, which means you need to stay on top of it. So you need to have staff that's dedicated for staying on top of the borrowers. I mean, not that they intend to stiff you, but it's just hard to keep track of them, and you need to keep up with them. Okay, specialty zones. They're like rabbits. They grow every year at the General Assembly. It started with just technology zones and then tourism zones, and et cetera. You see lots of them now. The one that I see used most often around the Commonwealth is the technology zone. And keep in mind that really both for technology zones and tourism zones, the businesses that you might want to be providing a benefit to in those zones need not have anything at all to do with technology or tourism. If you want to incentivize a steel plant in a tourism zone, you go right ahead. If you want to incentivize a dry cleaner in a technology zone, have at it. So don't worry about the names. But what you can do in these zones, let's see what's on the next. What is on the next slide? Oops, no. Is provide local regulatory relief, BPOL relief, business professional occupancy licensing tax relief, special zoning, fee reductions or waivers. So if you've got a new restaurant that wants to come downtown but can't meet the parking requirements, it would be possible to set up a special tourism zone or a technology zone covering just that spot and provide through that a waiver of the parking restrictions or whatever it might be, reduction of the tap-in fee. The zone can be as small as a single property or can be as large as the entire town. Town of Leesburg, I believe, is entirely a technology zone. And so through their ordinance, they provide certain benefits to certain companies that are located in certain places in that zone. The one exception to the rule I told you a minute ago, which is don't worry about what kind of business it is for this tourism financing program, which does indeed require a tourism project in a tourism zone. So if you have a tourism project in a tourism zone, you can capture that 1% local sales tax we were talking about earlier, plus a 1% from the state's portion of the sales tax, and a like amount from the developer, and use all of that money as a source of debt service on gap financing for the project. So you've got a $10 million hotel museum thing, or it could be just hotel for that, for all that. And the guy's got $8 million loan lined up. He's got $1 million in cash. He's trying to fill that last $1 million gap. this can be a way to use sales tax revenue generated by that facility to pay debt service and make it easier perhaps for that developer to find that last gap financing. The 1% coming from the state can be increased to 1.5% for projects of regional significance. The Cavalier Hotel in Virginia Beach, you guys probably seen or familiar with, was done under that provision, so they're capturing 1.5% of the state tax revenue, sales tax revenue for that project. And just so you'll know, there's a bill in the General Assembly right now kicking around where that 1.5% would increase to 2% for particularly large tourism projects. See where that goes. All right, so that, I'm gonna stop here for a second. That ends the fun stuff and your powers and purpose as part of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Anything I can help you with? Yep, okay, all right, we'll get on to the mom part of the speech. I know that you folks have had separate training programs on FOIA, at least I hope you have, because the code requires that you do. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I am going to focus on some economic development stuff that the training through the FOIA Council will provide to you. Confidentiality is the lifeblood of economic development. We're in the problem-solving business. A company needs a new location, it needs a new workforce, it needs assistance with a DEQ problem it's having, it needs new welders at $87 an hour, whatever it needs, and we can help them solve that problem if they're afraid to tell us what that problem is, because they don't want to read about that problem on the front page of the local newspaper. Its products might be controversial, so or the company itself might be controversial, so maybe that's a reason why you don't want to be talking about it out and about. Known interest in the site obviously is going to drive up its price. Loose lips sink ships. The folks in North Carolina seem to have gotten a grip on this, but for a while there, every year we could count on at least 2 or 3 projects coming just across the line from North Carolina, because the companies got tired of reading about their projects on the front page of the paper. I think they've caught on. So anyway, this confidentiality is important, and it really is the lifeblood for economic development. That runs up though against FOIA. There's 2 parts to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. One deals with access to public records, and the other one deals with how it is you hold your meetings, including the one you're having today. And so it provides ready access to public records held by a public body, you are a public body, and then free entry to meetings of that public body. The code says that each director, you folks, are to be provided with a copy of FOIA upon appointment or reappointment, and to read and become familiar with FOIA. So I'm sure each and every one of you has read FOIA carefully. I often get asked if your regional economic development group is subject to FOIA, and the answer is I don't know. Ordinarily, those regional EDOs are non-stock corporations and not governmental entities, but they still are going to be considered as an entity subject to FOIA if they receive 2/3 or more of their funding from public sources. So if they have mostly private financing with the local businesses, that's not going to be an entity subject to FOIA, but if most of their money is coming from other localities, then it is. So the answer is I don't know, because I don't know what their funding is. So new in 2020, authority members and its executive director must take a training course every 2 years. The first course was due to everyone by December 31, 2020, so last year ago. For new folks, you're supposed to have that training within 2 months of assuming office, and then you report your education status to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors. And the training is available through the FOIA Council, and it's available through the FOIA Council's website. So authorities, public bodies are required to turn over public records. What's a public record? It's all writings and recordings, hard copy or electronic, prepared by or in the possession of a public body or its folks, you, in a transaction in public business. So it's all notes, letters, database entries, texts, tweets, etc. Includes emails hiding in your deleted folders. If you haven't deleted your deleted items yet, you might want to go ahead and do that. So what's not a public record? What's not subject to FOIA? Your brain cells are not a public record. What you think about something is not a public record. You owe no one an explanation under FOIA. You owe them a piece of paper, a database entry, a text. You owe them a thing, not an explanation. You might want to provide an explanation, but you owe no explanation to anyone under FOIA. You'll want to keep snarky comments about people or projects in your brain cells and not write them down in any emails and things, because if you do write them down in emails and things, and if you get a FOIA request, those things are going to go flying out the door because there's no exemption, no ability to redact stupid, sophomore, rude, inappropriate comments in your emails and things. We've gotten caught by this in the past. So many times. So we had one a couple years ago where the project managers in an internal email referred to the nice lady representing the company as a bitch, which she was. But truth not being a defense, get a FOIA request, out goes the email. The reporter called her and said, BDP thinks you're a bitch. What do you think about that? And she was very gracious, but you don't want to have put yourself in a position where you have to write heartfelt apology letters to people because you called them a bitch in an internal email. Just keep that stuff to yourself. Don't put it down anywhere where it can be subject to FOIA. All right. Hardware doesn't matter. Your authority-related emails on your home computer are public records. Your authority-related emails on your work computer are public records. Your authority-related emails sent or received from your personal email accounts are public records. Your authority-related texts on your personal cell phone are public records. So if you get a FOIA request that says, send me all emails, all texts, all public records having to do with Project X, you may indeed be expected to fork over those things on your own or to fork over your computers, phones, whatever, to someone at the locality so they can download all those things on your behalf. At this point in the conversation, oftentimes I'll get asked, well, would it be helpful if we created email accounts for the authority, town of Front Royal email accounts? And perhaps you've already done that, I don't know. But that if that will help you keep things together in one place, that might be an attractive thing to think about. So when your chair sends out agendas for the upcoming meeting, he or she can send that from the Town of Front Royal account, and it can go to your Town of Front Royal accounts. You have conversations, electronic conversations back and forth on Project X. You can do that on your town emails, and therefore hopefully keep everything in one place. Don't know if that's attractive to you or not. I just mentioned that for whatever that might be worth. The FOIA request. So you gotta disclose all requested public records unless an exemption exists. The request need not invoke FOIA. Someone walking into the front door of town hall saying, hey, I want to see a copy of the performance agreement for the grant I read about in paper today. That's a FOIA request. So somebody needs to know, whoever's watching the front desk, needs to know that's a FOIA request and make sure that gets routed to the appropriate person. It need not be written. The guy can walk in the front door of the town hall and ask for it. Need not be directed to a particular person. Walk in the front door of the town hall and shout out his request. This is the one that really grinds my gears. The motivation for the request is irrelevant. Because I have cabinet secretaries on my board, I get politically motivated FOIA requests all the time, and it just makes me crazy that I have to spend my time, my very valuable time, responding to someone who just wants to score political points against somebody else. It just really grinds my gears. But there you go. The request is irrelevant. we only have 5 working days to respond to something. It's a drop what you're doing and get on an exercise. We can ask for a 7-day extension if 5 days isn't going to be enough, but you've got generally 5 days to respond. For us at BDP, if a request relates to a particular company in some way, we will make sure that we notify that company, and to the best of our ability, we'll offer them an opportunity to take a look at what it is we're going to send out to the requester. So collecting everything, redacting everything if appropriate, sending it to the company, getting their response, getting stuff back, and getting it to the requester in 5 days is a difficult challenge. So just, if somebody asks, if you get a FOIA request and someone asks for your everything on the text off of your phone having to do with Project X, don't be dilly-dallying around. Get on it and make sure that whoever's responding has what they need to do the job properly. You can ask for clarification from a requester, because trust me, you should see some of the requests we get. They are not clear at all on what the person is asking for. So you can ask them, did you really mean this instead? Or what, frankly, our favorite thing to do instead is to say, we assumed you meant X, and then provide whatever the X is, because the requests are often not clear. The FOIA request can come from a Virginia resident or a media representative for media from a newspaper, magazine, TV, or radio that broadcasts into the Commonwealth. So if you get just a random FOIA request from somebody in California, I got one of these last week, that's not a FOIA request. What we do, though, is treat it kind of sort of like a FOIA request. We don't worry about the 5 days, we don't worry about all that stuff because it's not a FOIA request. So we get to it in our darn good sweet time. But if you tell them, you're not a Virginia resident, we're not going to respond to you at all, take a hike, all they're going to do is get Aunt Mary, who lives in Fairfax, to send exactly the same request 20 minutes later. So you're really better off just responding to it, again, whenever you darn well get around to it, and treat it kind of sort of like a FOIA request, rather than invoking your ability to tell them to take a hike. Okay. So I noted earlier that we need to send off all requested public records unless there's an exemption. Here's the primary exemption for economic development. And I know it's really hard to see. At the end of the second line, there's a semicolon, and I highlighted it in red, and believe it or not, it's still hard to see. And I did that because there's 2 things going on here. Everything before the semicolon is proprietary information shared with us by a company. We're in the problem-solving business. They told us their problem. That's proprietary information. We will protect that stuff to the death. That's our lifeblood. Proprietary information from company ain't going anywhere from VEP, I'll tell you that. Everything after the semicolon is stuff that we generate based on that proprietary information. So project manager Susie gets a bunch of stuff from the company that deals with the various positions they need, the training they need for those positions, et cetera. And Susie's going to have a meeting with a local community college coming up. So she's making herself a spreadsheet that sort of puts everything together in one place so she can have a cogent conversation. That too can be held and protected from disclosure because it's information that we produce based on the proprietary information from the private company. So proprietary information, we have the right to protect, and trust me, we will, to the best of our ability. There are lots of other exemptions. There are dozens, scores of them under FOIA, but the ones that you're going to run into most often are contracts and contract negotiation. So if you're going to enter into a contract with somebody about something, you don't have to turn loose of things during the negotiation process, just when the final document is ready. Executive working papers, so to the extent you're preparing something for the town manager or the CEO of your executive director, those can be held in confidence as well. Financial documents provided by a company for their bond financing need not be turned loose. And that's also proprietary information, so that's really doubling up there. public records recorded or used for a closed meeting, and we'll talk about closed meetings in a minute, can be held from disclosure, trade secrets, and General Assembly is made up of lawyers. The advice of legal counsel can be protected as well. Non-disclosure agreements. So FOIA allows you to protect that proprietary information and other things from disclosure. It doesn't require that you do so, except for close security numbers and things like that. You can enter into non-disclosure agreement with a company that likely will require you to protect that proprietary information. But the NDA can never trump the FOIA. So if the company wants you to protect every single piece of paper they send you, you can't do that. You can protect their proprietary information. You can't protect everything from anybody. So just make sure that if you're asked to enter into an NDA, that you're only being asked to protect proprietary information and other things that you were allowed under FOIA to protect. You want to make sure that the NDAs are reasonable. Sometimes we have our own form, which is quite simple. So we oftentimes will get one from a company that's 28 pages long, and you have to slog through. And oftentimes those will have things that are just completely inappropriate. So we talked earlier about Susie putting together her spreadsheet on the training needs that are going to be available for a company and for her meeting with the community college. Excuse me. So we want to be able to hold that from disclosure, and the NDA though will sometimes say something like, and you cannot develop anything based on this proprietary information, and you cannot share any of this proprietary information with anyone outside of VEP. Well, that's just not realistic, and that's not how the world works. Susie needs to make her spreadsheet. Susie needs to have a meeting with community college to talk about that spreadsheet. So just make sure that NDAs don't preclude normal business activity. They will often be governed by the law of whatever state the company is in. Change them to Virginia law. I do it every single time. Do it all day long. No one ever fights back on that one. So just make sure that they're appropriate, because they're always. Okay, now switching from the FOIA records side to the FOIA meeting side. So you are having a public meeting of a public body, which is a gathering of 3 or more directors at which public business is being discussed. You're having a meeting if you've got 3 or more of you together, or a quorum, if 2 is a quorum, which is why I cringed. You might have seen me go, when you guys were talking earlier about having a 3-person executive committee.
Hey, Sandra, before you go on, did you do other exemptions? I don't recall.
I did.
She did?
I mentioned them.
Oh, contract. All right, we're good. You're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, there's dozens of them in FOIA. Help yourself. And if you got some.
Thank you.
Okay, no, you're fine. So if you had a 3-member executive committee, then it is theoretically impossible for one of the members to contact the other member to say, oh, we should have a meeting next Wednesday, because that's a discussion of public business. 2 of them is a quorum. They need to be having a public meeting if that's what they're doing, but they can't have a public meeting and provide 3 days notice if what they're talking about is having a public meeting. Never create a committee that has less than 5 members, please. I'm begging you. Please never create a committee that has less than 5 members, so that your quorum is always 3. So if 3 of you meet up at the local farmers market on Saturday and start talking about authority business, you're having a meeting. So you need to knock it off. 3 of you cannot be having that discussion unless you happen to have given public notice of your meeting at the town square and are taking minutes and are going to post those minutes, but you're of course not going to do. So 3 of you ought not be ever together talking about authority business unless you've taken the steps of providing 3 days notice of your meeting, and have taken minutes and have filed those minutes. These rules don't apply to staff meetings, so I'm not worried about the town staff, but it does apply to you folks as directors. Cannot vote by proxy. You cannot have straw votes in a closed meeting. Well, you can kind of do it in a closed meeting, but you can't really do it otherwise. To take formal action from stuff in a closed meeting, we'll talk about closed meetings in a minute, you need to reconvene in an open meeting. Forms is substance. FOIA and the courts that look at FOIA are very particular about being sure that you are very particular about following the rules for getting into and out of a closed meeting. So going in, you need to cite the FOIA exemption and give some inkling as to what the topic is going to be. Coming out, you need to certify that only thing that was discussed in that closed meeting was stuff that could be discussed in a closed meeting and that were the subject of the motion going in. And coming out, that certification requires a roll call vote. And new in 2019, so I'm not quite so new anymore, is a $1,000 civil penalty for not properly certifying coming out of a closed meeting. So, form of substance. Closed meetings. Remember our primary economic development exemption for public records, the proprietary records. You can convene a closed meeting to discuss that information. You can discuss the acquisition or disposition of real property. And there is a FOIA council ruling that acquisition or disposition means acquisition or disposition. So if you're talking about renovation or something else having to do with real property, that is not available for an exemption for a closed meeting. You may discuss in a closed meeting a prospective business or expansion of an existing business where no previous announcements have been made, so you know an ongoing prospect. You talk about the award of a public contract, and again, general assembly is made up of lawyers. You can consult with legal counsel in a closed meeting as well. Electronic participation is a little harder for localities than it is for me at the state level. But there are ways where you as individual members can join a meeting electronically for health or personal reasons. And it could be your health, or it could be the health of a family member who you need to stay home to provide care for. In order to take advantage of these things, you need to have a policy, and there's a sample policy on the FOIA Council website. And under this policy, the chair could approve or disapprove someone's request to participate electronically. If for a personal matter, you know, you had a flat tire on the way to the meeting, so you want to join by phone instead, you know, whatever it is, it's limited to the greater of twice per calendar year, or 25% of the meetings of the public body per year. In any event, you have to have a quorum of warm bodies. You guys have 7 members, your quorum's 4. You have to have 4 warm bodies around the table. So 3 people can call in if they need to. But again, so I mean, there's a policy and the chair has approved, but you always need to have at least 4 warm bodies around the table. And the minutes then need to state that those members joined electronically and where they took the meeting from. During emergency, like in the recent COVID emergency, there was greater latitude for localities and also at the state level to do electronic meetings, you know, just as we're doing now on Zoom, but that was, that's no longer available to you generally. So pretty much this personal request based on your personal medical situation or that of a family member or your personal need for, you got sent out of town on business, got a flat tire, you know, whatever it is, needs a policy and you need to do these things.
So I just want to clarify, for us to have a meeting and to take a vote, we need 4 warm bodies, but those who call in for like a medical reason, they can still vote?
Yes, so if you follow this policy and person A had a flat tire and wants to join by phone because he can't possibly get to the meeting on time, then yes, he or she is still counted towards a quorum, not as a warm body, but otherwise towards a quorum, and can vote and do everything that any other person could do.
All right.
Okay, procurement and conflicts. I know this is really hard, especially in a smaller town.
Can
It's
we,
really
let's go back,
important.
can we go
Yeah,
back
yeah.
one more time? So I just want to make sure, so that is, the electronic participation is just for exceptional circumstances only, right? It can't be this is how this member wants to participate. Like, say we meet 12 times a year, so they could, if it was exceptional, then they could do that 3 times. During
Hopefully you did.
during the course of the
You did
year.
math correctly, yes.
Right.
But
But it's not a standard practice. You have to have a flat tire or be in the hospital or I don't know what.
Well, with one nuance, so the law was changed, I think it was last year, or maybe it was earlier, well, maybe last year, 2021, or which year ran, to allow for this medical situation more broadly, because the General Assembly didn't want to exclude from membership on authorities like yours people who had disabilities that made it impossible or very difficult for them to attend personal meetings. So if you are permanently disabled or have a permanent medical condition that requires that you participate electronically, then you could, forever and ever participate electronically in that situation.
So would it be the 25%?
No, because it's for a medical reason, not just a personal reason.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. But, it's not you stubbed your toe that morning. It's, it had a reason that, because I do that all the time. It's more important, more impactful than that. Okay. It's important for authority members to be able to make connections. That's one of your great virtues, and the reason why having 7 additional people who are focused on economic development is so helpful and so important. So you can help make connections in your community and sort of see the big picture and make sure everything's done. But it's a tangled web, and you need to be cognizant of the rules of the Conflicts of Interest Act and make sure that you're not entangling yourself in something you ought not to be tangling yourself in. And this is especially challenging, I know, in smaller communities. I worked on, back in the old days when I was a bond lawyer, I worked on the financing for St. Paul's College in Lawrenceville, 7-member authority, right, going to approve my bond issue, I hope. On the authority, 7-member authority is the chairman of the bank that's making the loan, the president of the college, the president of the contractor that's going to be building the thing. It just went on and I'm like, please stop, you're making me crazy. So we were barely able to get enough people who could actually vote on it to get the job done. So I know it's hard in a small town, but there you go. It is what it is. So the Conflicts of Interest Act prohibits certain contracts and transactions by authority members with public entities, including the authority. And it may require notice of potential conflicts, like in the situation I was just talking about, an abstention from some actions. Like FOIA, under the Conflicts of Interest Act, directors are to be provided with a copy of FOIA upon appointment or reappointment and to read and become familiar with it. As dense and as hard as FOIA is to read, good luck with this one. It's really pretty, it's tough sledding. And like FOIA, new in 2020, authority members and executive directors must take a training course every 2 years. For you folks, since you're new, you should be doing it within 2 months of taking office, and you report that training to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors, or your town council. Also new in 2020 is that you folks now need to do the long form statement of economic interest, which I have to do every year as well. In fact, that's my weekend activity this year. This weekend is going to be working on my statement of economic interest. And so for you folks, you should be doing it as a condition to assuming office, and then annually thereafter, again, due shortly, February 1, for calendar year information. You'll also want to be mindful, if you read COYA, of gifts. COYA will tell you that nothing under $20 is considered a gift. But even below that level, I think you'll want to be careful accepting anything from anyone. You take a tour of a local plant, the guy gives you the company mug, great, take it, drink in it, put pencils, whatever you want to do, have at it. Take a plant tour, and then afterwards they provide you with a box lunch, great, chow down, have a lovely time. But once anything gets to be a bit more impactful or valuable than that, I think you'll want to be careful. You do have a rule, since you are a reporter, you need to do the long form report every year for your financials, that you cannot accept gifts having a value of more than $100 from any one company in any one calendar year in the aggregate. So if company A takes you out to dinner in February and you have a lovely dinner in town, you need to know what the value of that dinner is, so that should they invite you out again for dinner or play golf or whatever in October, you need to aggregate those two values together and make sure that they don't add up to more than $100. So what I do, I'm a reporter just like you guys are, is I keep a list of every kindness bestowed upon me during a calendar year. I just started one last week for 2022. The company, the mug someone gives you, the box lunch, everything. I write everything down. So even those are not necessarily gifts under COYA because they're not over $20, I just write it all down so that come the end of the year, I can think to myself whether or not it all sort of hangs together, or maybe in the summer you take a look and things are starting to look smelly because you've got a lot of things from one company and you're kind of wondering to yourself why that's the case. And so I would suggest going ahead and keeping a list of, again, kindnesses bestowed upon you by others in your roles and authority director. You must do that for the $100 thing, and it's just helpful otherwise to do that, even for things that are not gifts because they're not very expensive.
Can you explain conferences though, or
Oh my gosh.
or groups? Well, that could be another topic.
I'm going to point you to your own counsel
All
for
right,
that one.
sounds good.
And the reason why I say that is the rules are different depending on who the conference sponsor is.
Yeah.
And who's paying your way. And it's very confusing, and it's very fact intensive. It's mind numbing. So I'm going to throw you to the wolves. Good luck. But there are rules for conferences and things, and there are exceptions for if it's a publicly thing with lots of people, or if it's a stand-up reception where you're just doing hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah.
The rules are endless, and they're contradictory, and they're confusing, and so good luck. There's a FOIA council, there is a COYA council. They are really quite good, and well, not the FOIA council isn't, but they are really quite responsive and quite good. So if you have a question about whether a particular thing you're thinking about would or wouldn't violate the Conflicts of Interest Act, you can ask them in an informal ruling, and they'll get back to you pretty shortly, just a day or two. And that is something that they do confidentially, so you don't need to worry about that getting out. So just that resource is available. Should that be helpful to you? So I'm going to punt on your question. Sorry. Just because it's fact intensive. We already talked about most of this. Not accepting business opportunities because you're a member of the authority. You guys are smart enough not to do that. So just lots of landmines. Just be mindful of them. The Public Procurement Act deals with stuff being purchased by the authority for its own purposes. So a company that's doing bond financing through you need not worry about these rules. But like the other two, like FOIA and COYA, the Public Procurement Act is not the most well-written act I've ever seen. So you'll want to work through the town professionals for making any acquisition of services or goods. Ethics and public contracting is just an appendage to the Public Procurement Act. Don't need to tell you guys this, no lying, stealing, or cheating. Miscellaneous stuff. you guys, we talked about this, you guys have a lot of power. A lot of stuff you guys can do. And I think you'll want to be judicious about that. I was at a presentation a year or so ago from your counterparts in Halifax. And in their strategic planning process, they decided to focus on these 5 behaviors that are going to guide everything they do. To be honest, strategic, deliberate, agile, and collaborative. And I think that's probably a pretty good list. If you can keep that sort of thing in mind, I think you'll be in good shape. And oath of office, I mention this because it's a little unusual in the code that you need to take your oath upon appointment or reappointment. Well, this is not true for you. Yeah, you guys have new authority, but if someone else had been on an authority for 20 years and had taken their oath once, then they might want to double check that. So, resources. Here's the VDP's website. The Virginia Economic Developers Association is a statewide trade group for economic developers. You might want to consider joining and attending their conferences, and they have good training opportunities there. The Council of Development Finance Agencies is a nationwide trade group for authorities like yours. They have a weekly newsletter, comes out on Thursdays, probably be out shortly if it hasn't come out already today. That does a really good job sort of summarizing things that other authorities around the country are doing. You might want to sign up at free newsletter. You might want to go ahead and sign up. They also have specialty newsletters if you're interested in, brownfields or, whatever. They do have specialty newsletters as well. Again, free. Just go ahead and sign up. Area Development Online, just an aggregator of stuff having to do with economic development, and they have a weekly, again, free newsletter you might want to sign up for, as does Site Selection Magazine. And then I've also given you DHCD's website as well, because they have lots of information that's helpful for economic development for enterprise zones, Go Virginia, and so on. And I think that's it. That's it. What other question you guys got? What can I answer for you?
Any questions? A lot of information.
Yeah.
Well,
I know that was, and it went pretty fast, so sorry about that.
No, I will tell you that this was one of the better, thorough presentations I've received that captures our roles, our responsibility, the FOIA, and everything. I mean, you need to take this on the road. And I really appreciate it.
And in that vein, let me apologize for not being there in person. My sister and I are caring for our 94-year-old mother, and we're trying to avoid opportunities to get the 401(k). So I appreciate the opportunity to join you by Zoom today, or Teams today. Appreciate that.
We really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll probably be in touch more down the road. So,
Call me anytime.
thank you so much.
Call me before June 30th, because I'm old. I'm retiring June 30th.
Oh, well, that's not helpful at all. That's not helpful at all. So, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, sure. Thanks. Bye, guys. See you.
Are there any questions among the group that we want to talk about regarding the presentation that you think was good information?
Very helpful.
Yeah, it was. A lot of it sort of went past me because of just knowing what I need to find out with the Freedom of Information Act, Conflict of Interest Act, and read through those big clunky documents.
So, the step, part of that presentation is you all, will be sending you the link to the FOIA. As you said, y'all reported in December. So it's our hope that you try to take it at least by the next meeting. Also do the conflict of interest report. And so we'll get that in. We're on track of meeting all the deadlines. Email accounts, I would recommend that we establish a Front Royal email account as a group, if not already done or in the process.
I believe we have one.
Yeah, it's done.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying, if you get it, and then we'll have a group one on that. So that's part of that presentation. Now we'll go to item number 6. Set next meeting, I think we all agreed Thursday of February, and that would be February the 17th. How does that look? same time.
Good for me.
Yeah, works for me too.
All right. Any open discussion we all, in general, would like to talk about or consider for the next meeting? I know we have the bylaws.
On the 17th, can we have our meeting, like what time were you proposing that we were gonna have it on the 17th?
Same time, 11, we can move that around, as long as it's,
I mean, that normally would be fine, but I have a doctor's appointment that morning. I mean, if we could have it at noon, that would be helpful.
is everyone okay with that?
Yep.
12? All right.
Thank you.
So we have the bylaws. We'll probably start presenting a rough retreat agenda on that day, just to let you all know what we're thinking. We'll probably have to have a little bit more discussions on, to aggressively move forward, of just broad discussions in advance of the retreat of what you all think our key target area should be. I also gonna plan to have Lauren to give just a brief update of the comp plan, where we are, how it's going along, your role, and then also we'll use that as part of our retreat. So that's the next meeting, just to give an overview of the comp plan. Now, realize for the first 2 or 3 months, you all are gonna get a lot of information. And you're gonna be a privy to a lot of documents too, of the town. And so, at any time you start having questions, please let me know. I'm very open, where you can call, like I share with council members, you can call planning, you can call finance, you can call anyone you want, to try to get answers. I'm not, as you all know, I'm not the type of manager, I feel like I gotta control information and stuff. So I also want to bring up, we have a public information officer, Joanne Williams, for the town. Her role is to funnel all information through her. Should there be media, press interaction, that way we want to be responsive to the media. We want to make sure we get accurate information to the media, because the way we've had it, we did have Todd, who was our IT/PL, he went to Warren County, and it's important that we have someone who can put news releases together, important that we can collect the information, and it's very important that we're very responsive to the media and press and stuff. She also will be handling the FOIA requests among you all, if someone happens, and handle that from a media press standpoint. Obviously, we have George. He will review a lot of the FOIA requests before it's sent out, and he'll be responsible for that part. Is there any information or any other additional information? All right. Well, we will be sending you, the minutes will need to be approved at the next meeting. I know we haven't worked together for long. Keep thinking about, again, constantly be thinking about what you want to talk about for our economic development targets, our strategic plan. Just start brainstorming, and then we'll compile that stuff and hopefully have something in March. All right? So we need a roll call to adjourn the meeting?
No.
All right. Well, meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.